Hey guys, Wave618 here. It is the 27th of April and we're going to do our Bitcoin update today. It's been a month since my last video, and so I think this is a good time to get an update out there, especially considering how I said in my last video that I was looking at 7,700 as being a very key level. I mentioned how I was expecting price to come up in this corrective manner following this very sharpish move to the downside here. And yeah, I was expecting this just to be what we call a dead cat bounce or a bear market rally, short squeeze, whatever you want to call it. And 7,700 was a key level that I was looking for resistance at. Now we are now at 7,700, so I thought this was a good time to put a new video out. I want to mention in this video why 7,700 is key. I want to mention whether I'm still bearish, what I'll be looking out for confirmation of that bearish move, and also what would I need to see to switch to being bullish. So these are the key things that we're going to discuss in today's video. If interested, stay tuned. Alright guys, so let's dive straight on into it. So first up, I did my stock market video just a couple of days ago, and there's a very important reason that I uploaded that video before I did this one, and that is because I do feel that a lot of the hesitation in the Bitcoin price action at present is largely due to it consolidating and waiting for the stock market to make a decision as to whether that is likely to crash or go into a further uptrend, take out all-time highs and continue to the upside. I don't think it's completely clear what is going to happen. Of course, the general public are expecting, because we're expecting a big recession in the business cycle, people are generally expecting a crash in the market cycle also, which personally I think is probably, that's where my bias lies as well. I am expecting a rollover in the stock market, but you don't always have to have correlation between the business cycle and the market cycle, and so I'm not making any assumptions, and I do think in the stock market we're going to find out very soon which way it's going. Okay, but that is why I feel that we're seeing consolidation here in Bitcoin. Now, I mentioned in the stock market video that I expect answers this week about where the stock market is heading, and that's why I think we're going to get a lot of answers here on Bitcoin also. Okay, so ultimately let's just go through my long-term count here on Bitcoin. So first of all, so let's just pull up the Elliott wave count. So this is the major Elliott wave count. I'm looking at it as a 3-wave down for W, 3 waves up for X. That's an A, B, very extended C wave, 4.236 extension of A, and then we get our Y wave, which I believe is going to come down in a 3-wave move, first wave, second wave, third wave coming down further. So how far down was I calling it to go? So we were talking about possibly around the 1300 mark, 1100 to 1300, eats into this bit of consolidation here, as well as this high here at 1100. Okay, so there's support around that level, but also because I'm a big fan of Camarilla pivots, if we go on the weekly time frame, just pulling up those just a moment, and let's go on the weekly. Just bear with me while I enlarge this. So you can see here, I'm a big fan of Camarilla pivots, and on the weekly time frame, these levels have been working very well. So you can see here, we found, where did this big collapse fault come down to? It's down to the S4. Then we go all the way up in this, again, bear market rally. Where did it find resistance? R4. Several times it tried to get a weekly close above it and failed. Then obviously found a bit of support at the R3, eventually closing beneath the R3. Okay, so note that this period being 1 year, because we're on the weekly time frame, finishing beneath it means it's weak. As a result, going into the next year, when we test the R3, it acts as resistance. Massive drop down, finding a bit of support at the S3, but this looks very corrective. We'll zoom in and take a look at this in a moment. No, I don't think it's going to come up and test the R3 again. I am closely monitoring the daily Camarilla pivots, which we can take a look at in just a moment. But yeah, I'm expecting us to come down And provided that we come down drastically this year, I expect the S4 to act as support, which sits at around 1300 right here. And yes, you can get a wick beneath, just going to 1100 with a weekly close just above the S4 at 1300. That's what I'm anticipating at this moment in time. If it's more prolonged, we'll get a new set of Camarilla pivots, which we'll have to look closely at if it goes on until 2021. But yeah, so this is on the weekly time frame. I mentioned the daily is what I'm closely monitoring at this moment in time. Let's just pull that up just a moment. So here's the daily, and again, I want to show you how the S3, S4, R3, and R4 often act as very good support and resistance. So here in this downtrend that we've got here, you can see resistance at R3 comes down to S3, again finding resistance at the R4. We then come down and closing beneath the R3 here. So as a result, R3 of the following. So on the daily time frame, each period is a month, by the way. So for this month, we find resistance at the R3 all the way down to the S4. And then it actually closes above, finds a bit of, which suggests it is getting a bit of strength behind it. Closed the month above the S4. As a result, next time we test support, it rallies all the way up to the R4, finds resistance. Yeah, so we're seeing these levels time and time again getting tested, basically. Okay. Now, what we saw here is a massive shoot down beneath the S4. Yeah, very aggressive move down. Yeah, telling us this is basically a continuation of the bear market. But very interestingly, where did we close this month? So we closed the month beneath the S4. So again, for me, this is showing weakness. It came up in a very slow, staggered fashion. We'll look at the Elliott wave count for that to confirm the bearish sentiment with this climb up in price. And I'm looking at now the R3 as acting as resistance. You can see this is just above our 7700 level. R3 is sitting at 7896 roughly. Okay, so we might just come up and tag that level, but ultimately I do think 7700 is a very key level of resistance, especially on the monthly time frame. Okay, so this was just to illustrate a little bit about Camarilla pivots, why I'm looking at it still being bearish, and why I've got that 1300 outlook as my target. So now just pulling off the Camarilla pivots, zoom out a little bit, and the major pitchfork that we've got coming down here is another thing that I'm closely monitoring. You can see how this pitchfork, the lines of this pitchfork have been holding price well. So this is a shift pitchfork with the first pivot at the start of W, second pivot at the end of W, third pivot at the end of X. And you can see since this pitchfork has been created, you can see the levels are getting respected reasonably well. So here you can see the 0.5 line tested. It's not perfect. There's a lot of overshoots, to be honest. Yeah, again, resistance here at the 0.75. We come down all the way to the 0.5 on the opposite line. And yeah, I don't use these lines as triggers, buy and sell triggers. I use it as guidance, basically, because you can see often the lines get overshot, but it gives you a very nice indication of trend. It tells you how stretched above or below the median line here we are, and it tells us how far you can expect price to push. So yeah, this is the general pitchfork that I'm looking at, and again, there's a bit of confluence later this year with the lower warning line, which I think is a reasonable target, again lower here at around 1300. So a few of the indicators that I'm looking at for this guidance for the downtrend. All right, now let's talk a little bit more about this bounce that we've seen and why 7700 is a key level that I'm looking at. So let's just take off this pitchfork just a moment. We can take off the major Elliott wave counts, and yeah, so now what I want to do is go on the monthly time frame. So really zooming out here, and it's always good to look at the high time frame candle opens and closes to look for support and resistance. Basically, you can see in this downtrend, it's full of red candles, obviously. And every so often you'll get a green candle. So there's three. There's 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, and it's the open and close of these candles which are often very significant for support and resistance going forward. Yeah, so the monthly block that I want to focus on here is this one. So you can see the this is the open and close of this green candle, which is essentially a range in price. Basically, we're in a downtrend, then you get a bit of consolidation, which is made up of this green candle. If we zoom in, you'll see it looking like sideways price action there. But you can see going forward, this block has acted as very good support and resistance. So you can see we've come down here. We've seen wicks on these monthly candles. There again, wicks down here on the candle. We've not had a candle close beneath this monthly block yet. So you can argue that is a one bullish sign. You can see the candle close was for this red candle here, it closed at the bottom of the block, suggesting that we're not ready to come down yet any further. So that was a good for the bulls, I guess, coming up to this level and closing the candle just above this point. And you can see so far we have come up to 7,700. So this is the top of the block basically. This was one of the main reasons I was looking at 7,700 as a key level. We are at this point, and I do think the monthly close will be very, very key. If we shoot up and close above 7,700, for me, that is showing that the bulls are taking control of this market. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that we're going to get a wick and we're going to get a monthly close within this block. All right. So another key thing on the monthly level to look out for is this swing low here. Again, I was looking for a monthly close beneath that swing low. So if we just pull up this red line here, which is basically the bottom on our candle close on the monthly chart for this swing low, I was expecting this to act as resistance. So we'll see how this candle closes. But basically this is at 71.60. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a way off, around $500 lower than the current price. So it would require quite a big sell-off before the end of the month if that is going to happen. Now, don't forget, in the stock markets, we've got key earnings coming out. A lot of blue chip companies have got their earnings, so the likes of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, all of these have got their earnings coming out this week prior to the monthly close. So that could potentially, depending on the results and the interpretation of those results, could send the stock markets down or up, obviously. But if it is down, we could see that bit of a sell-off here in Bitcoin also, and get that monthly close beneath 71.60. That is what I was anticipating originally. Looking at price action at present, it might be a bit of wishful thinking to see that big sell-off so fast, but we'll have to see how it plays out. So these are the key things that I'm looking on the monthly level. Yeah, but I've mentioned why 7,700 is particularly key. All right, so let's just hide that one. Now let's really zoom in on this price action here. We're going to have to go in on the 4 hourly to take a look at this one. All right, so first of all, just using good old Fibonacci, this is our Fib retracement tool, and here's your high, here's your low. On the log scale, we've tested the 0.618. Generally, I prefer the linear scale for Fib retracements, and you can see here the 0.618 is where I think we may just tag, and that's at 7,900. Yeah, so just a little bit higher. So I'm not rushing into any shorts just yet. I don't like calling the top. Basically, I like to see confirmation. I'm allowing this to roll over gradually and start to come down, confirm it as a top, and then I start to get in with a wider stop. Yeah, that's generally how I play it when I'm putting on my whole position. Of course, sometimes I put on an earlier position, but generally I think it's a lot better to be patient and wait for that rollover. So yeah, that's one thing. So the Fib retracement level at 7,900 I think is a key one to look at. So we're getting very, very close to that now. I will mention the halving briefly because I know a lot of people always don't like it when I don't mention the halving and how it's obviously has to have bullish. It has to be bullish in terms of price action for Bitcoin, but in my opinion, there's bigger factors at play here. Okay, halving, yes, it works in favor of the bulls, but a stock market collapse is a bigger factor, much bigger. You got to weigh up these things, and the Bitcoin halving means absolutely nothing compared to a economic collapse. So I think that is what is pinning price down at present. Earnings is obviously a catalyst that could influence that decision. Monthly close obviously will be very significant. So I think this is what is keeping price going in this very corrective type manner, not really pushing in either direction at present. But yeah, on that subject, looking at the Elliott wave count, lots of people have lots of different Elliott wave counts, but putting it simply, it looks very corrective, overlapping waves again and again. The only argument for a bullish Elliott wave count would be if it is a leading diagonal, which I think would be very wishful thinking. I don't see a leading diagonal, but yeah, I can see that as being the only real bullish Elliott wave count if you're using Elliott wave in this scenario. But yeah, for me, the sentiment is looking very, very overlappy, and also I'm not a big fan of oscillator divergence, because I think you can see it with the naked eye that we're losing momentum in this upward move. You can see it originally, you get these sharp moves up, then you see much slower moves up, much wider, the highs are wider apart, and yeah, that's basically arching out of price action, yeah, and looking like it's beginning to roll over. Now if you use oscillators, you can see that, let's just hide this fib now. So yeah, just pulling up the good old MACD, and on the 4-hourly time frame, when it decides to load up, there we go. Yeah, you can see it basically very nicely. So some people just rely on these indicators to see a divergence between price action going up and the oscillator going down, but you only really need the naked eye. You can see the momentum's being lost here. So you've got higher highs in price, lower highs in the MACD. So there's your divergence, another of those bearish signals. So something else to look out for there. But yeah, so we're at major resistance. We've got divergence. We've got this it's very hard for me to say this is looking like bullish price action. It looks like it's arching out, looking as if it's about to roll over, and yeah, it looks imminent. It's just waiting to roll over further. I feel it's just waiting for a big catalyst to come out to make a decision. Now, obviously, sentiment can be derailed sometimes, and I want to show you how in the past Bitcoin has made what looks like a three-wave-ish initiation of a bottom, and actually turn out to be the key bottom and actually continue higher. So if we go on the daily time frame, just want to give you a key example how you can't just use Elliott wave to call the bottom. So here, this is back in 2015, and looking at this, it's very hard to say this was an impulsive move up. It looked very three-wave-ish coming up, 1, 2, 3. Very hard to see a bullish count in that, yet it turned out to be the key bottom. So it went up in 3, and then it came across sideways, and then it obviously just plowed higher. And again, this bottom here, if you zoom in on it, where's the 5-wave impulse here? It's hard to see. That's a clear 3-wave-ish move. You can argue, if you really zoom in on it, you can call this an impulse to here, and then an expanded flat A, B, C for a wave 2, and then it pushes higher, possibly. But the point I'm trying to make is you can't just rely on Elliott wave, yeah, because there will always be an Elliott wave explanation. You can even call this maybe this was corrective, and then this was a truncated move to the downside, hence the impulse started around here. So there's always an Elliott wave explanation for whatever price decides to do, and so that's why I'm not completely ruling out that this could be a key bottom here and we push higher. Certainly possible, yeah. But for me, it's not something I'd want to bet on. I think it's very, very risky indeed. So yeah, these are the key things that I wanted to mention. I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I've not looked at. Okay, so the Elliott wave count, let's go on the 4-hourly. As I say, there's lots of different ways of looking at the Elliott wave count. The Elliott wave count that I've got is this WXY. We've got 3-wave up W. X wave is a triangle. You can see if you zoom in on the volume, you'll see. Let's just pull up the volume. Yeah, so you got this tailing volume pretty much throughout the whole move. A little bit of a spike here, which made me think that this might have actually been the top when we tested 7,700 first time round. But it looks like we're just getting a bit more tailing volume, waiting for that catalyst to happen. So yeah, as I say, I see this as a triangle, an A, B, C, D, E. Obviously this bit of wick here kind of distorts it a little bit, but yeah, that's generally how I'm looking at it. There's plenty of ways of looking at it. To be honest, I'm not really interested in the Elliott wave count. All that I'm interested in is it looks corrective. We're at resistance on a horizontal time frame, on a horizontal level, and yeah, it's looking ready to roll over. As I say, may go up to 7,900 first. Now, a key question is, how if it does continue to go higher, at what point do we start thinking this could actually be bullish? So the key thing that I'm looking at is, as I've said many times before, is the 50-week simple moving average. Okay, always go back to basics sometimes when you want to know exactly what the trend is. It's a very good indicator of trend that should never be ignored. That's moving averages, and when it comes to Bitcoin, it seems that the 50 week is key. So not just the 50 week, but the 200 week has been key as well. But the 50 really seems to tell us on the shorter time frames where the trend is. So basically the color coding here, 50 is the blue, green is 20, red is 100, black is 200. Okay, let's just focus on the blue line just for a moment. So you can see price stayed above the 50-week simple moving average all the way during this move up here. We then test it, so you can see when it gets hit, it either rejects price or it trends beneath it or above it for a while. It rarely hovers around it. Yeah, so we hit it, bounce, cut through it completely. Next time, a little bit of a bounce, then we cut through it completely, and then we trend for a long time. Then again, bounce, cut through it, use it as resistance, come down, and then we cut through it completely. And this was the first bit of time where it kind of disrespected the 50-week simple moving average and kind of hovered around that level. It's the first time that I've seen it do that, and for me that was suggesting weakness here. And so when it went back above, I was anticipating it coming down, and it did it very sharply. And then there is the possibility we retest it and this acts as resistance. So for me to be bullish, price would have to come above 8,700. If we get a weekly or monthly close above 8,700, for me that is bulls definitely taking control of this market, and that is what I'd have to see to be bullish in this, because for me it's looking very bearish indeed. We're currently at the 20 week simple moving average. Again, it's an indicator that has been holding price significantly in the past, so particularly during this uptrend, just check out the 20 week simple moving average, holding price all the way up here, even coming down it held it as resistance. Yeah, so it's a very key level that often gets respected. So if it pushes above it, again, that is the bulls taking control. But for me, it'd be the 50 that would need to be overcome. Yeah, so that's my invalidation point. For anyone who's wondering, 8,700, I want to see price above that for me to switch to bullish, but I don't see it happening. But yeah, anything can happen, and that's where my invalidation point is. Another pitchfork I just want to show is, if we just take a look on here and pull up this pitchfork. So this is just looking at the pitchfork for the Y wave. So for the Y wave, first three pivots, major pivots, we've got first pivot, second pivot, third pivot. I'm using this pitchfork, shift pitchfork. We came down and we overshot the lower warning line, but found a nice bounce following that, and now we're at the median line. So again, another reason for a bit of resistance here at this median line. Okay, so yeah, I think it's very close to rolling over. May push up to around 7,900. Invalidation is 8,700. Long-term bearish target would be 1,300. So these are the key things that I'm looking at the moment. As I say, this monthly close, 30th of April, which is on Thursday, I believe, it's going to coincide with a lot of key economic catalysts in the sense of earnings on a lot of blue chips. So we're going to get answers very soon, and yeah, it's going to have to make a decision very soon, and we'll see how it plays out. But they're the key things that I'm looking at. I've explained why I'm bearish. I've explained what my targets are. I've explained the key levels that I'm monitoring. So yeah, let's see how it plays out. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. But yes, if you do want more regular updates from me on Bitcoin and the top 15 market caps, then check me out at Cryptology. My website is wave618.com. It's in the description to this video. And yeah, I generally have been offering the 50% discount for the first month on anyone who's never been a member of Cryptology, and the whole purpose of that is to allow people to sample it before committing, the full price. So the first month, as I say, is 50% off, and if you want access for that, you'll need to message me on Twitter, or you can email me, and my email is again in the description to this video. Alright guys, I think we'll wrap it up there. Alright, take care.